with a question for the Mohammedan. Let me ask him, according to Islamic tradition, according to the Sunnah, according to the so-called greatest example that we all should follow, what is the age of consent in Islam?
Okay, how long do you have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. I don't need 3 minutes. I'll respond back to you in 1 minute. So firstly, you admit it.
Wait. All right, stop.
So he had 3 minutes. All I need is 1 minute, inshallah, okay? So firstly, you made a claim that the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, married Aisha at the age of 6. Firstly, this narrative is taken from Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. There's a problem with this tradition itself. If you go to the chain of transmission, Hisham ibn Urwa was the person who narrated from Aisha, and they say when he moved to Iraq, later on in his life, he became old and he became weak in memory. All the traditions that come about Aisha's age is from Aisha herself, okay? So firstly, if you're going to bring me a narrative, I don't accept Sahih Bukhari anyway. I don't accept Sahih Muslim. This is not my hadith collection to accept. Because you're speaking to a Shia here, not a Sunni. Now, firstly, number one, from a Sunni perspective, not all Sunnis accept this. There's a difference of opinion, number one. Number two, you couldn't even prove what the specified the age of a relationship with a woman according to the Bible is not clear. Number three, we know according to the customs of the people of the time, going back over maybe 1,500, 1,500 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for people to marry at a young age. In fact, let's specify the age of consummation of relationship now. Go to one state, it'll be one age. Go to another state, it'll be another age. Go to France, England. That means that according to the French law, the British people will be considered to be pedophiles because the age of consent of relationship is different. So you cannot specify a clear-cut age of a relationship, number one. Number two, there is no authentic tradition that proves Aisha was 6 at the time and the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, consummated the marriage at the age of 9. Number two. Number three, according to the customs of the Jews, and if you refer to the Old Testament, you'll notice that there are passages which talks about having sexual relations with even minors. Am I wrong about saying this? Maybe you can clarify that to me afterwards. That's point number three. Point number four, what was Aisha's, what do you mean I've not answered my question? Okay, so who's interrupting now? I will give you 10 seconds. I'll give you 10 seconds for my time to ask me the question. Go on. You got 10 seconds for my time, speak. I will give you 10 seconds for my time to give me, number one, an authentic tradition that's not been narrated from Aisha. Number two, that's not come from Hisham ibn Urwa. Number three, specifying the clear age from the Bible, which you could not. Number four, the age differences from one civilization to another is subjective. Yeah, you said that, it depends on the time period, etc. So why are you applying rules which are 1,400 years ago now? Go on.
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Go on. You give me proof.
Right, so he stopped early. No problem.
Right. You can have my 30 seconds as well.
He has spoke for 2 minutes 30, and he didn't answer the question. Didn't answer the question. Let me just, always look, he's interrupting. Let me just remind everybody how I ended my last talk. I asked the question, according to Muhammad, according to the best example, what is the age of consent in Islam? Now, to defend Islam, to defend his paedophile prophet, what did the brother do? He chucked 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗓𝗕𝗦 under the bus. Now he did it because he's a Shia, which means that he chucked the vast majority of Muslims under the bus at the same time, because the vast majority of Muslims accept the teaching of Sahih al-Bukhari. So he's saying that because this embarrasses me, I don't accept it. But let's deal with him as a Shia, not as a Sunni, because that's fair. Because it's true that Muslims have no agreement about which hadiths are trustworthy. They can't agree. And so their interpretations of Islam differ vastly, based upon which hadiths they believe in. And yet Muslims to a man attack Christianity because of differences connected to the Old Testament, completely ignorant of the fact that Christians have 100% agreement about the books of the New Testament. Now, I will ask the question again. Muhammad, the best example, what age of consent did he give? What number are you willing to peg yourself to, O Muslims? Those Muslims who do agree with 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗓 are pinned to an age that a 6-year-old has the mental and emotional faculties to marry, and then is physically ready as soon as she can bleed. If you can bleed, you can breed, is the motto of the Sunni Salafists. That is the motto of the Sunni Salafists. We Christians, we have a better religion than Islam. Our religion does not put this question down to a prophet's example stuck in cultures in the past that were so hard-hearted that they couldn't understand ideas about childhood development. We, as Christians, allow certain questions to be answered by the reasonable faculty of our mind. It says in Scripture, work out your salvation with fear and trembling.
Okay, so after the death of Jesus, 60 years after the death of Jesus, you stupid man. And you don't want to hear that. Talk to the Muslims.
So, if you notice, Bob totally ignored my point about the narration from Bukhari and Muslim. Forget I'm a Shia. Let's look at it from a Sunni point of view. Now, there's a narration mentioned in 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗑𝗘 which says that the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, the difference of age between Aisha and I believe her sister Asma was 6 months. And when Asma passed away, I believe Aisha was maybe 18 at the time. But if you actually calculate the dates, you'll notice that Aisha was actually much older than the original claim made. Number one, can you give me a tradition that's not being narrated via Aisha from Hisham ibn Urwa? Because this particular narrator was accused of having weak memory when he moved to Iraq, they say. So number one, there's a problem with the actual tradition itself. Number two, there's no specified age according to the Bible. And as you said, it's subjective. Because if a group of people here decide that, 6, for example, is the correct age, it will become 6. So there's nothing in the Bible which forbids marrying a minor. Number 3, how can you complain about the age and consent of marriage when your own societies abhor unborn children? You kill unborn children. If you've got a problem with paedophilia, you should also have a problem with aborting your unborn children, because in your society, Christian society, you people support the killing of unborn children. Okay, I'm not interrupted you. Let me finish my point.
You weren't saying that when he was shouting, and that other guy was shouting. You weren't saying that.
What's he shouting about? Stop. Okay. Carry on.
No one's stopping you.
Make your point. No, make your point.
No, don't.
Because I don't want you to miss the...
He was talking to
I don't
him
want you to miss the point, because you're not answering me clearly.
They always want to live by.
Make your point. Let him make his point. I'm not interrupting.
So what I'm saying is, I asked this guy a question. This is his time. No one's stopping him. So I asked him a question about what was the...
1 minute.
You've got 1 minute.
No, you make your point. I'm trying to speak to you. It's okay. I don't need time on my side. He's still not answered my points. He cannot specify an age, number 1. Number 2, he cannot give me a narration without Hisham ibn Urwa in the chain. Number 3, it was a cultural practice even going back 1,400 years ago for people to get married at a very young age. Number 4,
age of 9 to 10 people were getting married even in Great
Okay, let me ask you a question. How old was Mary when she married Jesus' father Joseph? Please tell us. You can end my time. Go on, end it. Okay. He's not going to be able to answer my points anyway.
Are you done, or you want to carry on? Okay. So, for the second time in a row, I asked one question. Can he tell me what age does Islam prescribe as the age of consent? And for the second time, after over 5 minutes of speaking, we still don't have an age. But what he did do in those 2.5 minutes is he did throw Imam Bukhari under the bus. He said that Imam Bukhari, in his later years, had weak faculty of mind. That's what he said. He also threw Aisha under the bus, because Aisha is the source in Imam Bukhari for her own age. And notice the Muslim isn't protesting that he should shut up now, like he was protesting earlier. Double standards of Islam, because their prophet was a supremacist and Muslims feel superior. So they feel that they can do to you what they don't like you to do to them. Which is why if we advocate that every Muslim should be made a dhimmi and live like dhimmis, they would all be crying out Islamophobia, Islamophobia. But they're quite happy to make Christians dhimmis in Muslim majority countries. So, furthermore, I am still waiting for the answer to the question. What age do you want to peg yourself to, and what basis do you legitimize the age? Then he argued from other hadiths, demonstrating that with a bit of 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗢𝗕𝗘, Sufism, a bit of reasoning, you can come up with a different age for Aisha. So what does that prove? It proves that your hadiths contradict themselves. So if the hadiths contradict themselves by your own reasoning, then that means that they can't be trusted. Because you attack the Bible, because you say the Bible contradicts itself. So if you attack the Bible because it contradicts itself, you shouldn't trust your hadiths because they contradict themselves. Practice what you preach. We Christians are not ashamed of the idea that certain questions are open to the human faculty of reason. Notice, not protesting, not protesting. Why? Because our faith says that you can work out your salvation with fear and trembling. You're supposed to reason as a Christian from your salvation, to do good. And it is not good to have sex with kids.
I'm going to make
Oh wait, you want them to serve me?
I told him.
Spread out. Spread out. Spread out. I'll see if you'll suck me. I'll see if something.
No, I'm never
Spread out. Spread out.
You're talking rubbish.
You in the... Guys, spread out. Please. Spread out. The police are trying to keep Speaker's Corner open. They can only do that if we cooperate. So please, spread out. Spread out.
So I just want to make a quick couple of points before I go, because it seems Bob is trying to force which I don't accept. So number one, I didn't throw Aisha under the bus, no I didn't. Number two, what I said is the person who narrated it from Aisha, he showed Ibn Urwa, he had weak memory later on in his life. So scholars have criticized any traditions of his which come from him later. Number two. Number three, according to the reports, Aisha is a different opinion. As I mentioned, which shows that when Asma, her sister, passed away, there was only a slight age of difference. And at the time, I believe Asma may have been around she's around 24 roughly about this age, but Aisha was much older than previously claimed. Number four, you cannot specify a clear age for marriage according to the Bible. Number six, you asked me a question. You said at what age can a man marry a woman or have a relationship with a woman? This is a subjective issue, because the intellect of one girl can differ to another. Okay, number one. Number two, it can also differ according to the culture and the time period.
Bro, you're being rude to everyone. I'm trying to listen to him. I can't hear him over you guys. I can only destroy Muslim arguments if I can hear him.
Stop interrupting, boys. Continue.
So yeah, I believe in point number 5, I said, look, at the end of the day, Islam makes it very explicit that, yes, test them with their intellect, okay? So this is something which is subjective, okay? Because for one person, from one girl to another girl, it could be different. Going to one culture and community, it could be different. Now, what we do know for certain is, forget Islam for a minute, let's go according to the Jewish customs. At what age were the Jews at that particular period of time married? What age? At what age would they marry? Now from this, it will give us a rough idea that even if we were to accept that such a marriage did take place, it was not something which was from an ordinary. In fact, name me one single non-Muslim person who criticised the Prophet may peace and blessings be upon him for even marrying Aisha at that time. But the Prophet had many enemies of Islam. There were many enemies of Islam. Why didn't a single person criticise that marriage? This would be the first thing they would have attacked him on. Now, again, Bob, the issue with you is you cannot define paedophilia, because paedophilia is something which is a subjective matter, and it differs from one country to another. The French may consider the British people to be paedophiles. Why? Because the age of consent of marriage is different from France. Go to America, it's different from one state to another. So I will conclude on the final point, Bob, and that is you cannot specify an age on the consent of marriage, and number two, you need to stop bringing cultural norms or what could have been considered norm at that particular moment in time with modern what's happening now in the 20th century.
Okay, shall I reply?
Yeah.
So, begin. Right, notice, ladies and gentlemen, for the third time in a row, I asked him, what is the age of consent in Islam? And he didn't give me an age. Not one. But his essential criticism of Christianity is apparently Christianity doesn't give an age of consent. So, if Christianity is to be dismissed because it doesn't give an age of consent, what am I supposed to conclude by the fact that after 3 goes, the Muslims can't give me an age of consent from within Islam? And why is that? Because if Muslims reject the age given by Imam Bukhari, by Aisha, that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl and married someone who was 6, if they reject that, then they don't have an age to go by. They only have conjecture. And that means that Islam is no different to Christianity in this regard, except for one thing that has gone straight sailing over the head of every Muslim who makes this argument. And it's this: we Christians do not have an understanding of Jesus Christ that Muslims have of Muhammad. You think that Muhammad is the best example in everything that he does. We Christians believe that Christ is the best example by the ethic that he lived by. And that ethic that he lived by means that we should seek the good of others, including children, whom Christ our Lord said, "He who causes one of these little ones to stumble, it is better for him that a rope be tied around his neck and he be cast into the sea." Muhammad had sex with a child, Aisha, by Aisha's own testimony and by the testimony of Imam Bukhari. If this Muslim can't give me an Islamic age of consent, then Islam is no different to Christianity, and his criticism of Christianity is invalid. Christianity is not ashamed to say that some things are opening to the reasoning of humanity. The age of consent is one of these things, and history shows the consensus of humanity that 9 is too young. Fourth attempt.
No.
Hold on,
I've already responded to
You haven't answered my question. What was the age of consent in Islam?
I made it clear.
What's the age of consent? Sorry, I'm talking to one.
Stop interrupting. Everybody, please.
Firstly, number one, I think we need to reduce the time down because what's happening is becoming monologue. One person
You've got to read that with Bob.
Shall we reduce the time? 3 minutes too long. 3 minutes is way too long.
He's
It's
running
turning
out
into-
of puff. Let's do 2 minutes.
No.
Do 2 minutes. 2
I'm not,
minutes. 2 minutes.
brother, I'm not running out of
minutes.
half.
All right, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen.
He doesn't need
Hold on, man. Come on, man.
The powder.
Save yourself, Bob. Save yourself.
Carry on, man. Carry on. God bless you, bro.
Okay, so firstly, if you notice something, Bob totally ignored my point. I said, look, if the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, married Aisha at that particular age, and it was such a major issue, name me one single person from his opponents who raised an objection about this matter. Name me one. You can't. You ignore that. Number two, you said specified age of marriage according to Islam. I already explained to you it differs. It differs from one person to the other. It's subjective. As you mentioned, you can't apply what happened 1,500 years, 400 years ago with what's going on now. Okay, it's something which is subjective. Number three, I mentioned the issue about the tradition about Aisha's age anyway, which you disregarded. Number four, what was a common practice at the time. Number five, as you said, the Bible's not clear about it. Number six, it differs from one country to another, and again, over time, this is something which we know till today. There's some states, there's some places in America where you can be a 10-year-old and married. So there's nothing unusual about it. That's fine, 1 minute.
Are you stopped?
Yeah, 1 minute.
Okay.
Start with 1 minute. We'll do one.
I'll take
one
my
minute.
full 2
1
minutes.
minute.
Okay.
You want 2 minutes?
Go, Bob.
So for what? Was this the fourth or the fifth time now? I can't even remember. He hasn't. What he said was this. Fourth one. Right, he hasn't given age of consent. What he has admitted is this, that it's subjective. Which that's what he said. In Islam, it's subjective. But in the next breath, he's criticising Christianity because Christianity doesn't give an age of consent. Right. So when Christianity doesn't give an age of consent, that's a reason to criticise Christianity. No. But when Islam doesn't give an age of consent, suddenly this is the perfect guidance of Allah. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the fact, notice is interrupting. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact is the brother has just reduced Islam to the level of Christianity. It is subjective in Christianity, and according to this brother, because he rejects Sahih al-Bukhari, because he rejects Imam Bukhari, because he rejects Aisha, because he rejects the vast majority of Sunni Muslims, because he rejects those people, it's now subjective in Shia Islam. Well, I applaud him for being better than the Sunnis. I applaud him for being better, the Shia, for being better than those Sunnis who want to uphold a paedophile as a prophet. At least he gets around that problem, but he creates another problem, which is that it means that Muslims are making up Islam on the spot. Sharia law about the age of consent is subjective. It's bid'ah, so they're no better than us Christians. But the difference is, we Christians are permitted in our religion to reason from our revelation. We're allowed to use our human mind to come to human decisions about human things.
Who's he speaking to?
In Islam, they claim otherwise.
Shia brother. Go.
Now, firstly, number one, I have utmost respect for the different denominations of Islam. Let's make it clear. In fact, I have utmost respect for, irrespective of what faith you follow. What's important is manners. Okay, when you discuss with people, there needs to be certain ethics in place and manners. And you, as a Christian, you should know this as well. In the way Jesus, how he conducted himself. Okay, so you keep saying to me that look, I said to you before, it's subjective. And the Bible's not clear about it. In fact,
more space, please, thank you. Way too close, all of you.
You've got to project your voice, that's what's drawing people in.
Keep going.
yeah, unfortunately, Bob, I'm not as good as you when it comes to raising my voice, and this is not something which I do regularly. So, number one, as I mentioned before, it's something which is subjective.
Become Christian.
It's
Muslim, man.
Bro, please, let me just speak to him. I just want to make my... While these, I make my...
No.
So I'm going to make my, I was going to finish off about a couple of minutes ago, but Bob keeps asking the same thing. At what age can you have a relationship with a girl? As I mentioned before, it's something which is subjective. The Bible's not clear about it, neither is Islam to a certain degree. Islam, however, does say one thing. It says, and test them. This is what the verse of the Holy Quran says, is test them with their intellect, okay? So you know, you can sit and say acting, taking a moral high ground as a Christian when you don't offer no solution in society. In fact, in your society, it's quite common for girls as young as 13 to get pregnant. They have no right. They get dumped. Yeah, they end up having abortions.
Single mothers.
You got a major issue in your community of single mothers. But Islam obviously offers a solution for society, general society. But coming back to the point, number one, I never threw Aisha under the bus. Number two, as I mentioned before, there's problems with the traditions and the conflicting reports. All the reports come through a person called 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗓𝗦𝗢𝗔. Number three, cultural practices of the time. Not a single person from the enemies of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, criticised him for this marriage. And Bob again cannot provide me a single person.
Okay. So what we got basically, ladies and gentlemen, that finally the Muslim admits that Islam is no better than Christianity. It's subjective in Islam, it's subjective in Christianity. So what kind of criticism is it to say to Christians, well, the Bible doesn't give an age of consent? Well, it clearly doesn't in Islam, according to his version of Islam, because after 4 attempts at trying to get the answer, he came down to, oh, it's subjective. It's subjective to who? To your intellect. So that means that the so-called great guidance of Islam boils down to is, what's your opinion? That's what it is. But we Christians are permitted to do this in our religion. In Islam, it says that on this day I have perfected your religion for you and completed my blessings upon you. Well, if he perfected and completed the haram and the halal, as I'm told, then what is it? Halal or haram to have sex with 9-year-old children? So, if it is down to a subjective opinion, then that means you receive no guidance. And if you've received no guidance, your revelation is neither perfected, nor is it completed, which means your Quran is lying to you when it says that it is. But we Christians have said that we follow Jesus Christ. We are allowed to reason about these human questions. Unanimously, the age of consent has gone up. Even before Muhammad, it went up to 12. Muhammad brought it down according to the Sunnis, and the Shias know better than the Sunnis, so they reject the sources of the Sunnis because their hadiths contradict one another. I never managed to get on to Christian society diatribe, but we'll come back to that.
Yeah, so Bob,
Hold on. Go on.
so you mentioned that. Okay, so what you could, so there's a particular word you might be familiar to. It's something. It's called ijtihad. Ijtihad is when a scholar deduces ruling from Quran and Hadith. So they would look at certain matters and decide whether the certain norms of that particular society, whether certain acts would be considered permissible or impermissible. So there are secondary laws which also make certain acts unlawful. Now you said, as you admitted, that the Bible doesn't specify a particular age for marriage. Okay. Islam does, however, say that test them with their intellect. Now, whether the Bible says that or not, I don't know. You can tell me whether the Bible says test them with their age. But you also mentioned something important. You said as time changes, people's views and thoughts change. What's accepted then may not necessarily be accepted now. I already said to you that, look, not a single opponent from the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, raised an objection with this particular marriage. If it was something which was not commonly accepted or against the culture of the particular time, they would have raised an objection to it. Yes, okay, in this day and age, let's assume that this marriage did take place. Would somebody in this particular age marry somebody as young at that age? Maybe not, they wouldn't. I mean, I don't know many Muslims who married 5 or 6 year olds, and if they have done, then definitely, according to the cultural norm of what we're living in now, it's something which most definitely wouldn't be acceptable to a certain degree. Why? For secondary reasons. Not because there's clear-cut textual evidence against it, but maybe perhaps for secondary reasons. And this is what, so that's the point I wanted to make.
You on now?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, I'm going to check for 2 minutes.
Go on.
Go, Bob.
So, he's talked about ijtihad, and he's right, I do know what ijtihad means. Because, unlike most of the Muslims here in the park who are attacking Christianity, I actually have a degree in religious studies. I actually specialise in Islam and Christianity. So yes, I know what ijtihad means. Ijtihad is proof, ladies and gentlemen, that when the Quran said that I have perfected your religion this day, and completed my blessings upon you about what is haram and halal, that it was wrong, because Muslims ever since that day have been completing the completed and perfecting the perfected, which demonstrates the illogical inconsistency of the claims of the Quran. We Christians in the Bible are called to use our reason, our intellect, and to be wise and prudent. And that is why in the 5th century we raised the age of consent. 2 centuries before Muhammad married a 6-year-old and had sex with a 9-year-old. We raised it to 12, still too low, but we know better, and Christians argue for higher ages of consent. The brother pointed out the problems in Western society. Single mothers, pregnant teenagers, all of it is true. We've got that kind of rot in the West. Why? Because the Westerners abandoned the Christian faith and now they are reaping the harvest of what they have sown into the world. But is Islam better? Honor killings, bombs, murders of apostates, raping, these things still occur in Islamic cultures. Egypt, Pakistan, go and check it out if you don't believe me. It's not like Islam made the Muslim world better, it just made it different.
So firstly, so Bob, out of all people, you should know that Shias are also victim to terrorism as well, okay? So number one,
talking about terrorism.
You're talking about people carrying out
Bombs of terrorism.
Talking about everyday experiences of Christians in Pakistan and Egypt.
Yeah, and as I said to you before,
kidnapping of Christian girls in Egypt.
We oppose this as well. As Shias, we are also victim of this issue as well. In fact, Sunnis are also victim of this extremism mentality, which
Sunni girls
is a
don't
big
get
discussion.
kidnapped.
They do. But okay, let's figure that for a second. Wow, 30 seconds already gone.
We'll give you 30 more.
No problem. So coming back to the point, Bob, there's a few issues here. Number one, as I stated to you before, you admit yourself that the consent of age of marriage. Ijtihad. You mentioned ijtihad. Ijtihad doesn't mean Islam is complete. Ijtihad is a method that scholars deduce rulings from Quran and Hadith. For example, electrical toothbrush. Is this something halal or haram? There were no electrical toothbrushes around that time. Yes, scholars will look at something similar. So you have something called a miswak, which is a stick which they use to brush the teeth. So halal and haram has got nothing to do with the fact that Islam is incomplete. In fact, there's many issues which we face today in a society. One of the discussions which we're talking about now, which is the age of consent of marriage, the Bible doesn't even have a clear-cut solution to this. So how can you sit there taking the moral high ground